Hey everyone, Rick here, and folks, welcome to my Game Room Tour 2026. Seems like just yesterday I was recording the Game Room Tour for 2025, but folks, here we are. It is a new year. There are so many games to be played. Let's start this tour with something that I decided to do. I think that it is kind of interesting. I changed the orientation of my table. That's probably the biggest change. Apart from, of course, our dear friend Trick or Treat Pete here, who, you know me, I love Halloween stuff. And when I get done and ready to pack up my decorations, man, I'll show you in a little bit my storage closet for a lot of the stuff, but I don't have room to pack things away. So Trick or Treat Pete, until I can find a better place for him, he is just chilling out here, vomiting candy for anyone interested in that. Right now, he's actually hooked to this button. So then he'll vomit at the push of a button. Otherwise, his little sensor thing here was way too sensitive. Even the slightest shadow, and he was puking up Three Musketeers. All right, anyways, enough with the Trick or Treat Pete review. Folks, look at this. We have switched up our table. So the reason for having the table long ways like this, which you may almost think probably should have been the case from the start, but the reason I had it horizontally here for the longest time was because when I would game master my Dicey Depths games, from my perspective, having the table long ways meant I could reach all the way basically to the end, and I had full domain over being able to touch and handle everything on the table. But what I found was having it long ways like this meant we could get more people around the table. I just have my little station over here, and I'll typically put some side tables around me over here with all my accoutrements, but we needed more chair space. So, like, for example, even when we're not playing Dicey Depths, game night this last Saturday, we had 9 people. So we had, the 4 chairs on either side, plus an additional chair I stuck on either side. So 3 on either side, and then me, and then the 2 over there. So yeah, we have a bunch of these gaming chairs now. I actually originally bought this one myself to go to Net War. We have a local huge LAN party. They fill out arenas. You bring your monitor, your PC, your game console, and you just game for 27 straight hours. It's called Net War. It is so cool. But of course, you got to bring your own chair to that kind of thing. They have folding chairs, but who wants to sit in a folding chair for 27 hours? So that chair I bought, but then I got a couple of these office gaming chairs for reviews. This one just went up on the channel, and it is so comfy. Plus, look how handsome that looks. But if I get enough companies to keep sending me these chairs for reviews, I can start replacing all the chairs around the table with these gaming chairs. I just thought that was so funny. Anyway, so that is why I've now made the decision to have this. Plus, it really opens up like areas over here where I can actually walk around and look at stuff now. So I have been given license to ramble by friend of the channel, Sam. So shout out to Sam, because she was like, Rick, when you do your game room tour this year, don't cut yourself off when you think that you're going on and on about something, which I try not to do, but we all know it's inevitable and happens frequently. So she said, you have a license to ramble this year. So folks, I made sure my battery on my phone was charged up, because I'm probably going to just go into story time. I'll try to put some chapters in the description or in the comments so that people can skip ahead based on whatever like area of the room that we're on at the time. But here, let's start right here. So I moved into this house June of 2015. I know we're starting off story time already. But when I first moved in, a lot of these games, I would venture to say most of these games, there's what? I don't know how many games are stuck in just these shelves right here, but you know, when I was in my parents' basement, I had like 500 games. I was just buying games all the time. Of course, I wasn't hosting game nights at that time, so I was just buying to collect, to accumulate, and so I came into this house with hundreds of games. I just filled my basement floor. When I bought this house, I knew the basement was going to be my game room. It was a decent size. Oh my gosh, I wish it was twice the size at this point. But what can you do? So I picked up these IKEA Kallax gaming shelves because they were all the board gaming rage at the time. And yeah, they've held up. This is over 10 years now. I can't believe it. This is 10 years in this house. But we have all the games up on these shelves. And so the point I'm trying to make is that when I moved all these games over here, I popped them on the floor until I got these shelves up. And then I started, just to get them off the floor, putting them onto the shelves without really much of a rhyme or reason, telling myself that eventually I would come back and actually organize them, either thematically or, you know, by game family or game type or alphabetically or something. Well, spoiler alert, the games are pretty much exactly where they were when I originally put them up. The only thing is, you'll notice I prefer the vertical way to get to games because then I can just pull a game out and grab it instead of when they're stacked like this. And now I want to play Akuza and I have to, I mean, these other games on top are really heavy, so I'd have to really, you know, it's just annoying to do that. But some of these games just are better suited flat. So I have caved occasionally and have horizontally placed them, or I guess, I don't know, that's vertically place them. Most of the time I have them like books, and then also you'll notice most of the time the name of the game will be oriented like this across there whenever possible. But obviously huge box games are across the top. There's so many fantastic games. Folks, Rune Wars, this first edition of Rune Wars has the 3D mountains. Do you know when you're playing a tabletop war game with figures, how cool actually having 3D elements of the board is? So that edition of Rune Wars with the 3D mountains is so cool. Tumbling Dice is such a fun party game. There are so many games in here that even when I originally bought them, were not necessarily even intended to be played. Because like I said, when I first got into the board gaming hobby, probably in 2009-ish, at least that's the registration date on my Board Game Geek account. Prior to that, when I was just dipping my toes into the water, what I was actually doing was just trying to collect games that I thought sounded cool. And a lot of the time that meant old school fantasy games. And we'll take a look at my old school shelves in just a second. But there were games that got severely panned, maligned, called absolutely abysmal. But I still collected them anyways. So like games like this, Monster Quest. Can I get up here? Oh my gosh, I'm standing on a chair right now. Because does this game have a decent back of the box? Some of the games have horrible back of the boxes where there's really not much of a look at how the game looks. But look at that. Like that's just almost kind of looks roll and move-ish. But then there are some cards. You'll notice this is in shrink wrap. But what I heard when I decided to pick up a game like this, it's more so for just adding to the collection than ever really intending to play. Same with this I Am Vlad game. And there's so many others just, you know, here and there, games that I grabbed originally without even thinking that I was going to play them. I just wanted to collect them. But obviously, moving in here in 2015, having my own space, I started hosting all these game nights. And so I started being a little bit more, not cautious, a little more picky. There's a better word for it. Restrained, I don't know, in the games that I picked up, because now I was developing my taste in games and finally acquiring games based on if I'd like them, if my group would like them, if they would actually get played. Like so many of these games, like all of this Quest of the Dragon Lord stuff, this stuff is insane, but I doubt that I'm ever gonna play this. But let's just take a look at this. Like, first of all, look at this box. This is a linen finish. I don't know if it comes across on video. It's like a linen finish box with this red foil. Like, how cool does this look? And of course, I'm trying to unbox this like with one hand. Hopefully, some of these boxes, obviously, if you know board games, are kind of tight. This one I think I can lift off because I just want to show you. Look how cool some of this stuff looks. All of these characters, but here's the cool part down here. Look at all these figures. So there's obviously so much. When I was collecting these originally, it was mostly anything that was like fantasy based with figures. Definitely got brownie points from me. But there's all these expansions, and there's a couple that are in shrink, which means the one that I actually want to show you must be this. Because take a look inside of here. Does it show in the back? Here's some more figures. One of these boxes, though, I swear, unless it's something else, has actual metal miniatures in blister packs like you might find at a store back in the day. Obviously Ral Partha and Ironwind Metals and companies like that still sell the metal figures. Yeah, here we go. Look at this. So this was an expansion for Quest of the Dragon Lords. And look at this. They have siege engines and bases for those. But look at this. This box came with these blisters of these metal figures. Oh my gosh, I was obsessed with this. Are you kidding me? That's just so cool to me. So stuff like this, I doubt that I would ever actually play. At least at the time when I got it, I really didn't have that much of an intention to play because I really didn't have anyone to play with back then until I got my own place. But even now, that would be maybe a hard sell with my current group. But anyways, just anything quirky like that, I just absolutely loved. But yeah, so many of these games are just where I put them originally. Arcadia Quest, had some fun with that. That was back in the days. Cool Mini or Not, the pioneers of the big, massive, all-in pledge levels with all the plastic figures and so many expansions, more expansions than you'd ever play. So I definitely was into that in the beginning, but there's so many other really cool games that people are so big on requesting reprints of and stuff, like the Warhammer 40k Forbidden Stars game. But there are just random games too, like I don't know if people have ever heard of like Black and White or Amber Route, which are just sitting here next, below Abaddon, which I don't know if you're familiar with the fact that apart from the Command and Color series, and Memoir 44, and what are some of the other ones set in that same kind of and Battle Lore, obviously we got the Battle Lores first and second edition, but this was a mech futuristic version of the Commands and Color system. So you still had the cards that told you which units could activate, but instead this has mechs all the way down to infantry figures. So, like, how cool is that? That is so awesome. Abaddon is a fantastic game in that line, but I never hear about Abaddon. But I wanted to get down to this because this is just an example of how random things are. Like, we have a couple character packs for the Pathfinder Adventures card game, right below like Abaddon, and right above some other, what were these, Polish or something published in? Yeah. Anyways, not that necessarily matters, but right in the mix are these old school games. These were some of the early games that I collected as well. Probably the most well-known of these are probably Barbarian Prince. And so this was a fantastic solo game. And yes, it does have, still in this box, the metal figure for that. But it's like a combat and survival solo adventure where you are the Barbarian Prince and facing random encounters and whatnot. That is so absolutely cool, because who printed this? Was it Heritage Games? I think it's Dwarf Star Games. But another one of these is Dragon Rage. Now, if Dragon Rage sounds at all familiar to you, I'll put that back appropriately in a little bit. It's just kind of a tight squeeze there. But if Dragon Rage sounds at all familiar to you, it's because that one did get a full on reprint, which is right here. Look at this. So we actually have a full reprint of the original Dwarf Star Games Dragon Rage with beautiful big board game quality fold out maps, but then the classic old school fantasy counters. But these are big, thick, rounded edge counters, so that's really nice. But yeah, so there is Dragon Rage. But there's so many fantastic games. Defenders of the Realm was one of the earliest games that I picked up in my collection. Um, which is kind of funny because I'll tell you, and I'll probably talk about this more later, that I'm more of a competitive gaming fan than a cooperative game individual. So that is something that I learned just over time. After playing games and games and games, I definitely decided that I was more of a um, competitive fan than a cooperative fan. And just every so often I see games that are like not pressed up against the edge enough and it bothers me. But anyways, so then, Arcadia Quest to Super Dungeon Explorer, that was a big deal. Those two were right around the same time, and so there was kind of a rivalry there, but Arcadia Quest clearly won that one out. But a bunch of these older games too, down to like, the original Thunder Road, Hero Quest stuff, Dark World, Lionheart, and Key to the Kingdom, which just got a reprint thanks to those folks that are doing all of those old school reprints. God, I can't remember it now, but they did like Volcanic Island or Fireball Island rather, and they did the Tower reprint and all that kind of stuff. And then I do have a few copies of Hero Quest here, and I'll tell you, when I was originally accumulating these games, and I would get them by the pallet load just by placing orders mostly on noblenightgames.com and also Cool Stuff Inc. Um, but Noble Knight especially, oh my gosh, they had so many of these old classic games. But so that's where I would get them, and I'd get them in huge piles delivered to my parents' house, and then I just stick them on a shelf and just leave it there. But all that to say, I would be so envious when someone on Board Game Geek would post that they had seen thrift store finds. And I would be like, man, I wish I could find something from a thrift store. And one day, not at a thrift store, but another thing, downtown Omaha had a couple stores that I love. One of them is called the Imaginarium, though I'm not going to get into the whole story there, but it's no longer called the Imaginarium. Imaginarium is now down the street, and I think this store is now called the Old Market Emporium. But either way, nowadays you go into those stores and they know what they have, and the prices, don't expect to get a deal there. Holy cow, they're expensive. But I found this copy of HeroQuest there for like $35, and it was basically complete, and I couldn't believe it. So I snagged that, and then at some toy shows later on, I found additional copies. Or I can't actually remember. Maybe I bought one of these online, then I found one at the Imaginarium, and then I found one at one of these toy shows I keep going to. But either way, I would use pieces from one to complete another. So this one has the best box, the best board, and the best components, and it is complete. This one has mediocre components, but I think it's complete. And then this one's just a parts copy. And then, of course, this is the new reprinted edition. But I do want to go. It's already been 20 minutes and I haven't even gotten off the first shelf. So let me do a little running around here first before we get into some more specifics. So when you first come down here, obviously there are all these shelves full of games and Trick or Treat Pete, of course. But then I have these little tables and chairs here. Sometimes I'll do two-player games on here. Right now, piled on this table are games that I've just recently got that I need to learn, that I need to play. So Speakeasy is the big new Lacerda game. I am so excited to learn that. For Christmas, a friend gave me Betrayal 3rd Edition, and my parents gave me this Halloween not roll and move, hidden movement game by Emerson Matsuuchi, who also did Spectre Ops, and I love Spectre Ops. So a Halloween version of Spectre Ops, that sounds fantastic. A friend for my birthday got me Deep Rock Galactic. My dad picked me up a couple of these. There's a store chain called Retail Rebel, and you can find like returns or overstocks or whatever. So he found brand new, still in shrink, this crazy flower for $3.60. Now there is, and then they just gave him the expansion as well. Now we have already played this once, and it was a lot of fun. And I couldn't believe for $3.60 you got a game that actually was this 3D tree that you're putting these plastic flowers and stuff on. But there's kind of a story behind that in terms of, you look up Crazy Flower on Board Game Geek and it doesn't exist. It's actually under a different name, and then this is potentially like a bootleg version of that. I don't know the whole story there, but they're identical games. And then I bought out the Ship Tactics inventory at my local game store. They had they had this and all the expansions for like 30% off. So I grabbed all that, but I still need to get that played as well. But again, there's a ton of games over here, and we'll still talk about some of those games, but I want to get to the rest of the room just as a quick, run around. We have obviously you're going to see a lot of these vending machines because I got really impulsive one day and I just decided to get all these vending machines for the game room. The coolest thing though was when I really took kind of a deep dive into the world of vending because I joined forums, I reached out to distributors, and I found out who would sell some of the coolest stuff that you could put in the capsules, like the capsule toys and stuff themselves were the hardest thing, because you can find these machines all over the place. It's the stuff that you put in there. And so I think SSM vending was one. There were a couple others too, but yeah, we'll talk about the vending stuff in a little bit. But then, of course, we have the mini crane machine. I love this. And I just went online, mostly to Amazon, and grabbed a lot of stuff that you could stick in here. So you have all kinds of just DBZ figures, other anime figures, Nintendo things, Pokemon things, keychains. And with this kind of machine, you actually got to create your own display across the top. So I love doing that. Now, these crane machines, in case you didn't know, there is a claw tightening setting that you can adjust on here. Mine, so hopefully no one who ever plays in my game room watches this. Not that it's actually a secret, but I have mine set on it to actually close and stay closed every 4 tries. So the first 3 tries, it's going to be loose and it's going to wobble and it's going to drop the thing before it actually gets to the chute. But every 4th try, it will hold on to something. So there's that. Anyways, so I mentioned the IKEA Kallax shelves. Well, I obviously started needing additional shelves a lot sooner, soon after I moved in here. So my dad ended up picking up these at an auction. So sadly, I don't know the maker model or where you can find those. Not that they're the best for board games because they are fairly shallow. So even a game like The Others, which is just a normal box size, does stick out from not only the side, but especially from the shelf. You can see sticks out a bit. But the adjustable shelves were what was cool about those. So I was able to, stick a bunch of games on top, but also a bunch of games just everywhere along there. And we'll get back to some of these specific games in a little bit. But a lot of my favorites, a lot of Kickstarter things that I haven't even touched are part of these too. Like all this Arcadia Quest Inferno stuff I never touched. Sword and Sorcery, I think they're already on their 2nd edition of Sword and Sorcery, and I haven't even touched that. Obviously haven't touched any of the other stuff. Haven't touched any of the Besiege stuff or the Blood Rage stuff. We have played Conan. We have played the Zombicide. I've used all the expansion material in one gigantic Zombicide game. That was a lot of fun. Let me zoom back out also. So again, more vending machine stuff. So this is something I did. I think this was included in last year's review video, was all of these shelves that I put these games facing out, because these are some of my favorite games, at least the ones that are these perfect square box sizes. But at least this way you get to see the board game art. And then of course behind here are all of these additional games. I have to remember what's actually back there. But truth be told, there's not a lot that I really am raring to get played behind there. But some of these are my absolute favorite games. Barcelona is top 10 for me. Praga, top 10. Tilatum, probably top 5, if not my very favorite game. CO2 Second Chance is, like I always say, my top 3 games, that my number 1 game of all time currently rotates between CO2, Tilatum, and Agricola, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But but Barcelona is right there. Praga is right there. Those games are just so awesome to me. I love those crunchy Euros. Which is funny because, again, when I first got into board gaming, I was all about the dudes on a map Ameritrash games, roll the dice, thematic games, but now I'm such a Euro hog. I then did get this little shelf. I think we had this in last year's thing, but I don't think, obviously this is new. These are all of my Lion Rampant figures. I commissioned, I can't remember now, like 500 Lion Rampant figure, 500 War Games Foundry medieval and ancients figures for specifically to play Lion Rampant. And yeah, these shelves have been so perfect for that, because each of these shelves, it's a 3 shelf box, and I picked up 4 of them, all from Target. They were like $15 a piece, and then a separate tray to go on top for the guys with the long lances. But look how perfect this ended up being. Like, the gap between the shelves was just perfect for all of these swords and halberds and stuff. But yeah, these figures are fantastic. But the cool thing is, so when I'm ready to play, I just pull out the whole drawer and then take this over to the table and pull out the figures and put them on the table, because that just makes things so much easier than, grabbing figures out of a shelf and putting them on the table, kind of like I would have to do with all of my Warhammer stuff that's over here. Though those guys are at least on movement trays, so I can grab entire units at the same time, but we'll talk about that in a second. Anyway, what's over here is games that I repeatedly play and want to get played and learn. So for example, this cube over here, these are gifts also that I need to learn. So a friend of the channel, Sam, gave me Tainted Grail. Got to get that played and learned. Clash of Cultures. My friend Mike got this for me. This is 2nd edition classic Clash of Cultures. I need to get that learned. My friend Chris got me the Board Game Geek game. How cool is that? But I need to get that learned as well. So this is the shelf for games that I need to get learned, but also games that I need to get this learned. The Steffenfeld Civolution game. I'm really excited about that, but it's been out for like a year and I haven't even cracked it open yet. But some of these other ones I have played and I absolutely love, and so these are also favorites as well. Kalimala, the new version of Kalimala with the mat. Cascadero's fun. The House of a Thousand Corpses game. Cities. Ziggurat is actually a very interesting story. So my sister works for a company that was able to get their hands, they distribute Mindware products, and she was able to get her hands on this game early. So we made this a family thing. Now, this is a campaign legacy game. I'm not a huge fan of the legacy aspect because I like replaying games. And being able to start fresh and stuff like that. Whereas, legacy games, you're tearing things up, you're putting stickers on things. But we decided to make this a family affair. So like on holidays or special events, my mom, my sister, and me would get out Ziggurat, we'd play through a chapter, and we'd shelve it until the next time. Well, we finally got through the whole thing. So I think there were 6 chapters. Every chapter had new stickers, new cards. It's a fantastic family weight legacy game. So if you ever wanted to dip your toes into legacy, Ziggurat was fantastic. And so that was here because obviously we're pulling that out of there all the time. But we are done with it. But you can still play with the finished version, so I do appreciate that. Other games that I love here that I don't get to play often enough is Messina 1347, Carnegie, and Golem. I want to get those to the table again real soon. And then like the Azul Planted, those kind of games I pull out of there all the time. This is one of those situations where, when I first got this here, I had like 3 empty cubes, believe it or not, where I could stash little knickknacks and stuff. But as I get more games, those all get full. And then obviously this is the last bastion of knickknacks down here, but that's about to, have to go because we have a bunch of new games over there that we need to put back in. Pokemon Central over here. Also, Dice Jail. Bad dice go in there. We have more dice in here. I mean, there's dice everywhere you look around here. Coasters. We have Henry and Ricky who are constantly playing Super Nintendo. So we have some vintage, video games here. This drawer pulls out with like the games and controllers and all that kind of stuff. Bunch of little dragons and knickknacks and things. Here's a very cool shelf right here. This display cabinet. So this has so many of my sentimental favorites, especially on this shelf right here. So we have a lot of miniature building authority buildings and figures, metal, mostly fantasy figures that I found on eBay and bought. But this group of these zombies, these are like kit bashed Games Workshop figure zombies. And a friend of mine, before one of our Dicey Depths games, he bought these from a seller on Etsy. So I thought that is so cool. And this letter with the kind of zombie on it came with that set. But like that beholder back there, the manager of one of my friendly local game stores painted that and gave that to me. This letter that says Dear Rick with this lone wolf figure that was painted by Gary Chalk, and he wrote me this letter. I like to do souvenirs when I run Dicey Depths games. So like there's my one left of my custom Dicey Depths die and dice tray. All of these figures here were painted by Brian Bledsoe of DGS, Dead General Society Games fame, for Free Blades, one of their Kickstarters. I love that they had options to have the figures painted, and he did such a fantastic job on those guys. But then over here, like behind that Hordes of the Things army, there's a letter. The Read Me First thing's a letter. So people who will send me letters, I keep everything. A friend of mine, when he road tripped down. Actually, a friend of the channel, Matt, road tripped down a couple times to play Dicey Depths with me. And one of the things he gave me were these bone dice, which I absolutely adore. Friend of the channel, Sam, gave me this custom emo Rick Funko, and that was her letter up there. Friend of the channel, Hal, painted those two figures you see back there. And that Read Me First letter is his letter. People who reach out to me to have me review Kickstarter things, like this Rock Bottom card game back there where that letter says to our friend Rick. I keep that. And that Ziploc baggie back there, that is a playtest copy of Dungeon Tryouts. They reached out to me and asked me if I would do that. Those two Mimic Masters there are kind of remnants of our big, huge Mimic focused Dicey Depths game. I painted the one on the left, and my friend Adam painted the one on the right. He also 3D printed and painted these guys here for different Dicey Depths encounters. This otter wizard with the tuning fork wand is just absolutely adorable. And we have a dryad, and then we have Gorlith the Devourer back behind there. One day for my birthday, my friends printed and painted all these kobolds and a whole bunch of figures, and I just put these 4 in here. A friend of mine's son from storm debris, that's a chunk of a tree, and he thought it looked like a slice of a watermelon, so he painted it up as a watermelon, and then he gave it to me. But in a friend of mine's daughters, my goddaughter's birthdays, they'll give out little party packs, and so I save some souvenirs out of those and stick them in here. But anyway, so this shelf just has a whole bunch of things. Anytime someone ever sends me anything, I'm such a sucker for sentimental stuff. I always keep everything. And then down below here are some old foreground kits that I put together, those buildings and also these buildings. And these figures here are Confrontation plastics that were pre-paints. Can you believe it? Confrontation is still a game. But they don't offer the pre-painted stuff anymore. And then on the very bottom here are Super Dungeon Explorer. Dennis Warhound Gates painted all of these Super Dungeon Explorer figures for me. And then we have, of course, more vending machines over here and this crazy heavy bone staff. I got it, was it a Renaissance fair or a craft fair? One of the two. I kept seeing these guys at this booth. I don't think I may have one of their skulls or one of their faces somewhere else, but they do a whole, oh, they do those coasters. This husband and wife tag team do this kind of cool design. So I have a bunch of coasters from them. I have a bunch of faces that go on the wall from them. And then I picked up this like walking stick thing from them. Old school blacklight DCC RPG. I say old school. I don't think it's that old, but it was back when DCC RPG first came out. I have some of my tables back here. So this table folds out to be a 6x4 foot table. This spider legs wooden card table folds out to be a 3x3. So we always have extra table space. There's Cecilia. She's constantly saying hello, wanting to give me high fives. Every time I win a game, I come over here and I give her a high five. Up here are some kits that I built it. That's the company name, I built it. They sent those to me for review. These kits, don't they look gorgeous? One of their Facebook posts years ago said, hey, we're going to do an arena. I wish some miniature companies would take heed of that, because that ended up falling through. They never ended up releasing an arena. But that is the one thing. We have enough dungeons, we have enough castles, we have enough dwellings. What we do not have is an arena, a combat arena. Like Stefan Picorni of Dwarven Forge fame, he posts from time to time that huge gladiator arena that like was a prototype back in the day. They one day, Dwarven Forge, please release a modular arena, or I built it. Please release your arena that you were about to do. Some miniature company, please do an arena, because oh my gosh, I just feel like everyone needs an arena. But anyways, so this old wardrobe full of games, I picked this up at a thrift store a long time ago. I just thought it'd be so cool to put some of my old games in. These are old games, and they're among the first games. Again, when I first started collecting, I was collecting for collecting's sake, and I was really targeting old school fantasy games. And originally, the idea was everything in this wardrobe would be no earlier or no younger than 35 years old. So everything in here would be 3.5, 4, or more decades old. But of course we started running out of room, so there is some newer stuff in here, and I'm going to go through this probably in more detail than I really want to in just a second, because there's so much I want to talk about. You have no idea some of the, just from my early collecting days, it is so hard for me to resist talking about some of the things, because right here, you look at this, there's no identifying with the naked eye what any of this is, right? But you wouldn't believe, oh, I want to get in there so bad and pull out some of this stuff. There are so many cool things from the early days of fantasy gaming. Let me just pull out something. Like, what is this? Okay, some of those are actually newer. Some of those are like Gygax magazines, when the Gygax magazines started to come back. But a lot of this are these. I went back and tried to find all the Aries magazines from back in the day that actually had full games with them. So like this is from 1980. So this was almost a decade before I was even a twinkle in my parents' eye. So obviously I missed out on all this kind of stuff. But this copy of Aries comes with a full copy of Citadel of Blood in here. But that's what all of these are. These are all so many crazy things. Okay, I'm gonna pull out, I swear, I'm gonna come back here and I'm gonna pull out some really, really cool stuff that I was collecting, including even down here. There's so many cool stuff. Oh my gosh, there's so many cool things back there. But anyways, moving on from that. So this is where my snack zone used to be. Now it's just kind of a box of snacks. One of the things, because I obviously had this grand idea, I was going to have this snack zone. And it was going to have all different kinds of chips and cookies and everything. Here's the problem. When I play games, I don't necessarily snack. And also what ended up happening was people would bring snacks, and the only people who would ever touch these snacks was like just one person, which I don't mind as long as they were being eaten. But then at the end of the month, I'd still have all these snacks left, And I'd be like, all right, you're going to have to take all this home so I can put in fresh stuff because those are about to expire. So it just wasn't getting eaten enough by enough people. So I was basically just feeding like one or two people, and there was so much left over. So I was like, all right, we're probably going to do away with the snack zone stuff, but we still have a fridge that's not really stocked right now. But typically I'll have pop and water and stuff like that. And there's a lot of energy drinks and beer and stuff in there right now. But these are all the dice I got for Christmas. So I have these fan roll liquid core dice that are really cool. My parents gave me those, as well as these glitter polyhedrals, these metal dragon scale, even these silicone ones as well. And then my dad got me this, again from Retail Rebel. Is this going to open? Yeah. These are liquid core as well. They have these dragon eyes in them. My uncle actually got me a set of these, the exact same set, so I have 2 sets of those now. But again, buildings like this, Miniature Building Authority, dipping their toes. At this point, they're no longer dipping their toes. They are full on diving headfirst into the world of 3D printed buildings. So you buy one from them, they paint it for you, and it's assembled and everything. So this is exactly how it looks when you buy it. And they are, for the most part, really, really cool. They will, at least the ones that I've gotten, maybe, because I used to jump on these as soon as they would post them. They'd say, hey, we just have this, and then I would jump on it right away. So I got like probably the first one of a lot of the batches. And so, you know, when you're the first to get anything, you typically are going to have some defects and stuff. So there's a lot of things where things are warped like this, or the peg holes and the pegs for the roof don't line up like this roof does, so that's pretty good. But there are some issues with that kind of thing on some of these other buildings. Some of the roofs don't even stay on, you know, with pegs. They're just kind of resting on there. But they look really good for the most part. I've just really toned down buying a lot of these because I have so many of them now. Over here, again, kind of being a little impulsive because like when I have the Ogre Designers Edition, that huge, gigantic box, but around that same time, they also released this Pocket Edition because they wanted to do a throwback to back when you would get one of these Ziploc baggies of games. And yeah, like this one was only $3. And it is a full-on copy of Pocket Ogre. And I ended up buying 40 of these. I think there's even a big stack of them back there. Just because I was obsessive about that kind of thing. And then when the Fantasy Trip was being reprinted, and that's another thing we'll talk about in a second, I have a complete set of everything released for the Fantasy Trip, including the supplements, the, you know, advanced Melee and Wizard and all that kind of stuff, and even Interplay magazines or other magazines that had even just a little fragment of an article about the Fantasy Trip. Like I tried to collect everything I possibly could for it. But anyways, so when they redid it, they reprinted it, and then, so now here we have these kind of VHS boxes of Melee and Wizard. I grabbed 5 of those. And then I don't want to toot my own horn here, but the fact that we were able to actually purchase these full-on retail displays was, yes, you probably guessed it, because of me. So I reached out through the Kickstarter and I was like, can we please somehow be able to pledge for the retail display version of this? And so they said yes. And so yes, now we were able to actually get this kind of retail display. Because, you know, I was doing this whole kind of game shop corner of my room, and so anything like that was so obsessed with. So this is these are copies of Wizard, copies of Melee. I probably should have grabbed 2 of these because now if I wanted to open even just one of those, it would make it look incomplete. But gifts from family here. My sister worked at a place that sold this kind of thing, and so yeah, I said, yeah, give me a whole case of those. It's just playing cards and dice. And then of course we get to some of my dice. I love this acrylic display. I can't remember now where I picked this up, but it divides all the dice really nicely from D4s to D20s all the way down there. Percentiles, spin down life counters, sets of dice, unique dice like Steve Jackson Games like doing their various kinds of dice, and then even more unique dice like the DCCRPG dice that have, you know, D15s and stuff like that in it. Some metal sets, a D100, more DCCRPG looking stuff. Some even more unique looking dice. So, you know, dice within dice, a Ten Commandments die, rock, paper, scissors dice, where on your body have you been injured? You know, if you're doing that kind of thing, die. Uh, blackjack dice, days of the week dice, just all that kind of stuff. Even some of these old dragon dice. And then we get into, you know, some of the different sets of dice, dice that companies have sent me for review, dice that friends and family have got from me as souvenirs on trips, dice my friend 3D printed for me, dice that I've gotten from Free RPG Day, from the local game store. Talking about impulsive, one day over by the trading card area, Target had a bunch of these dragons, and I was like, that's random, but yeah, I'm gonna buy one of each since I just found these. So yeah, for some reason, I whatever. Friend of mine for Christmas last year made this D&D dice bag, which I thought was very cool. There's so much stuff piled up on this counter, it's ridiculous. And then down in this counter, this is my display of curiosities. So let's zoom out on this. So what we have is just a bunch of interesting things. Across the top here are Warhammer Fantasy, I think battalion boxes. This is an Empire, that's a Bretonnian. When I was first getting into Warhammer, and I was still at my parents at that point, I had Painted Figs, I think it's what it's called, paintedfigs.com. I had them commission those armies for me. The coolest thing that was in this display case at one time was actually behind this Bretonnian Pegasus Knight. On some of my other videos, you'll see that back there was a Mox Jet. Yeah, one of the Power 9 for Magic the Gathering. A Mox Jet from the Unlimited set, but I ended up selling that because it was just so expensive and I wasn't doing anything with it. I love looking at it, but that ended up funding a new car for me, partially. So I was like, you know, it's one of those things, because obviously my game room down here, yeah, I'm sitting on the floor now, but my game room's in the basement and I'm down kind of a hill. Now I have a sump pump and a battery backup for that sump pump, but if this basement ever flooded, all that cardboard would just be toast. So it was just too big of a liability. And obviously I could have brought the card upstairs, but I was like, it's just sitting here not doing anything. Who knows? It could be destroyed one day in a fire or a flood, and it's thousands and thousands of dollars. So yeah, I ended up selling that card. But we have a lot of other really cool stuff in here still. So this is a 4th edition Tunnels and Trolls, old school copy. And just because it's 4th edition, don't think of that like Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition, because like Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition came out what, in the mid 2000s? So that was 30 years after release. Tunnels and Trolls 4th edition, I think, was still in the 70s. So it's like they went through edition after edition, and they still had different printings of those different editions as well. But that's why this looks the way it does, because yeah, 4th edition Tunnels and Trolls wasn't 30 years later. It was just a couple years later after release. So that's why it's still spiral bound and looks like an ancient piece of history. But we do have a Tunnels and Trolls latest edition when they did their deluxe reprint, and so this is the leather bound version of that, still shrink wrapped. Underneath of that is the Dungeons and Dragons wood box reprint of the original white booklets. So that reprint set was very cool, and if you want to see what's in there, Wayne's Books did a fantastic unboxing, and I've bought from Wayne before. I think some of my Tunnels and Trolls, or not the fantasy trip stuff from Wayne's Books, but he did a fantastic unboxing of everything that's inside of there. I haven't cracked mine open because at this point, yeah, I just don't know if that's ever going to happen. Grimtooth's Traps Ultimate Edition, leather bound when they did that, backed that on Kickstarter as well. Still a sealed copy of Ralparth's Caverns Deep in here. And again, when I was going impulsively crazy, I bought a whole bunch of dead CCG stuff way back in the day. So boxes and boxes of booster boxes of these battle cards. which are so cool. They're like lottery scratch offs that you play with friends to scratch off wounds on your heroes and monsters cards to see what happens to them. I think that is such a fascinating idea. Um, and then again, the other 30 copies of Ogre Pocket Edition, a whole boxes and boxes of Wyvern starter decks, and this insider's guide. And then I also have a jacket for them too. But I have, yeah, I know that's kind of random, but I found a windbreaker jacket with a wyvern rather, embroidered patch on there. But then also a bunch of Dark Age stuff, Towers in Time stuff, Bane Master stuff. And this was one of the coolest things, was this Bane Master starter kit. It came with a booster pack, a starter deck, but most importantly, a checklist. Now, I haven't seen that checklist anywhere else, but that is very cool. I backed the Joking Hazard Kickstarter, so that's like a wood box for them, and they did this cool little comic that I thought was cool. All these copies of Rat Splatter also have kind of a story. So I mentioned earlier that I bought early on a lot of stuff from Noble Knight Games. Now I don't think they do this anymore, but back in the day they used to have a 1 cent section. I can't remember what the threshold was, but for every X dollars you spent with them, you could pick something from the 1 cent section. And a lot of times I would grab a copy of Rat Splatter. So in separate orders, because I'd grab a lot of stuff. I would spend hundreds of dollars with them, so I would go through their 1 cent section and grab all kinds of things. And it was like promos, cards, minis, these copies of Rat Splatter. But each of these copies was from a different order. And yeah, so that's just a lot of Noble Knight Games orders right there. Speaking of old games that I bought a bunch of, I have a whole bunch of these Valkenburg Castle. Now it looks like there's a few there, but there's actually, I don't know if you can kind of see back over there, there's all the way down to the bottom. Those are all Valkenburg Castle copies. Don't ask me why. Inside of here are a bunch of Freeblades figures painted by Blue Table Painting, more Miniature Building Authority 3D printed stuff, so many more dice and figures. But okay, so here's where I am going to go on a little bit of a tangent, because this is, I don't know, maybe I may be the only one trying to document the history of polyhedral dice being sold at Walmart. So one day at Walmart, I saw they were selling polyhedral dice like this. So this just blew me away. Seeing this at Walmart, like, are you kidding me? This box, this campaign dice box, sold at Walmart, came with 3 sets of dice, as well as 3 dice pouches. So 3 sets of dice, 3 dice pouches, and they had 2 different versions of it. Now, they're both green and blue, but this middle one would change. So this is purple, whereas this one is red. And I think even on the back it shows that. So green, blue, red, each with a dice bag, whereas this is green, purple. Green, purple, blue. Then, I don't know how long later, I went back to Walmart, and then they were selling these. And this is kind of the same thing. Different look to the box, but it is 3 polyhedral sets, 3 dice bags again. The dice do look somewhat different from each other, but they still did the same thing with the middle set. So it was still green on the top, then red or purple, and then blue on the bottom set. And then sometime later went back to Walmart, and now here are the campaign dice they were selling. Now they went back to this style of dragon for the packaging, but just with a different color. Now here was my first question, because I couldn't remember which of these came first, because you'd almost think it was this one, then this one, than this one because those two dragons are the same, but these had the cardinal logo on them, whereas these have the Spin Master logo, and these also have the Spin Master logo. So I almost think they started with cardinal and then went Spin Master. Now they were Spin Master originally as well, because there is, references to Spin Master on the back of these, but cardinal was like the big thing that was all over the packaging. So I think that's why I'm thinking these went first, then these came, then these. But now here's what happened. They still have the 3 dice sets. But these are more glittery, so like emerald, cloud blue, and purple, whereas these were emerald, kind of a darker blue and purple. However, you no longer got a separate dice bag for each set. You got just one big bag for all the sets. However, in this same range, they then released dice towers. So these dice towers, if I can carefully move that to the side, I picked up 3 of these. These dice towers had the same kind of branding and logos and look to them. These dice towers came with a single polyhedral dice set, but did not come with a dice bag, but did come with a foldable tower, and then it does advertise the 2 possible dice set varieties that you could get with that. So all the time I picked up 3, 3, 3, and then I picked up 3 of those dice towers as well. And that's not over, because let's skip over back here. Now, this is a mess back here because I have so much stuff piled up in boxes and everything. But in this bag, went back to Walmart not too long ago, and sure enough, they once again have a new style of dice. So these campaign dice, 3 dice set again. However, the D4s, now the D4s on those other sets were the pyramid shape, but these are these rounder shape for these 3 dice sets. Still with the same kind of dragon in a different color and more marbly looking dice, but now they came with a dice tray. They do have a storage pouch, so 1 pouch for all the dice, and a silicone dice tray comes in this now. Can you believe that? I don't know if you can kind of see it back there, that blue, that teal and white. So yeah, I just thought, how funny is that? This is the latest iteration. I now have 4 generations of different dice that have been sold at Walmart. I may be the only person documenting the history of role-playing game dice sold at Walmart, but they also now have their 2nd generation of dice tower. But look at this. So now the dice, I think it says on the bottom, comes with a dice tower, comes with a 7 dice set, but it now also has 6 magnetic nameplates and a dry erase marker, so you can get an initiative track going on there. But how cool is that? So that is 2nd generation of dice tower sold at Walmart, and 4th generation of dice sold at Walmart. So yeah, I'm keeping an eye out on that kind of stuff. I know that's probably a little bit insane. However, also Five Below, and I've gotten polyhedral dice. I'll have to get back there in a second. I have gotten polyhedral dice from Dollar Tree. I couldn't believe it. They always have sold normal 6-sided dice, but I found polyhedral role-playing game dice sets of RPG dice at Dollar Tree, and that bag there is full of them. But then at Five Below the other day, I found these. So here's tabletop role-playing dice, and there's 3 different sets. Like this one's called Dragon's Flame, and they're kind of glittery, and they come with a dice bag, which actually has a symbol on it, which is very cool. So, I mean, now the back of the box makes those dice look, I think, way better than they ended up looking, because these look a little milky, but maybe under the right light or something they'll look cooler. But there's 3 varieties of those. But as you can tell, I'm a little obsessed. Anytime I go to a big box store or something and they have role-playing game material, I snatch it up really fast. Here's all the rest of the Snap Ship Tactics stuff that I picked up from a game store. Here's a couple new games that I also need to get played that are still boxed in here. Here's all of this, all these HeroScape expansions. We'll look at my HeroScape stuff in a second, but while we're back here, we might as well look back here. Tons of painted figures are in all of these boxes there. I still have a bunch of unopened Magic stuff from my recent Magic acquisitions. There's more painted figures over here. My original DCC RPG poster before the game even came out. I think, what does that say on there? 2012? I can't quite see from here. February of 2012 or something like that was when that first came out. Um, there's a bunch of cool things in there that are game related. This R, I love this R. A friend of mine gifted me that R from a store that was going out of business. Of course, here's one of the oldest things. If you go back to my early game room tours, which actually was in my parents' basement in my bedroom, I had this even back then. I had dreams of game store life. So back in the day, here's my yearly rant about this. Reaper Miniatures actually had a pre-painted line that they called Legendary Encounters. How fantastic does that look? Does that not look so cool? You could get a pre-painted Minotaur, pre-painted skeletons, what are those? Orcs, goblins, and every one of these blister packs is a different type of thing. I can't even remember how long ago that was. It was so long ago. And my gosh, do I wish they would re-release that. Being able to just buy pre-painted figures like this, just a blister pack of these orcs. Today, back in the day, I just grabbed one of each of these. If it was today, I would probably have grabbed 10 of just that blister pack alone, so I could have a big old army of 30 orc spearmen. But then, of course, I also have a bunch of these Battletech Ironwind Metals, Ralpartha figures. So here, I'm sure I talk about this every year, but Ironwind Metals ran a Kickstarter to print some Chaos Wars figures. A couple new armies. I think the Kickstarter I backed was Dwarves and Undead, is what I want to say it was. Well, I pledged at the level that allowed me to not only name a figure, but also write its backstory. So I do have a copy of the campaign book for Chaos Wars that has Zelktuvia of the Abyss. That was who I named. This is Zelktuvia. He's facing backwards right now, but he's an undead warlord. And there's a certificate of authenticity. I can't remember how many of these they gave me. It may have been 10. So I got 10 blister packs of my own named figure, and I do still have the campaign book that has, and if you have it at home, Chaos Wars, one of the campaign books for the Undead Army, look for Zelktuvia, and that's my guy, and I got to write the backstory for him that was printed in there. And then all these blister packs for this game called Ronin Duels. This is insane because it was like almost you had these robots, but all these blister packs were different accessories that you could equip to the robot, typically via magnets. And so you could have different guns, different melee weapons, and you would magnetize the robot and swap out its equipment and battle each other. I thought that was cool. But it's also very rare. I never see anything about it. And it was out of print a long time ago, I believe. Then there's some of these games stacked back here are games that I love and then were on clearance for literally like $5 or less, and I just could not let them sit there. So I ended up grabbing them. Just one more copy, right? Like, I love Master Builder. Here's a shrink wrap copy of Master Builder. Wrath of Dragons, The River, Dragon Island. And then down here is actually the Fantasy Trip reprint deluxe box. This is a Tunnels and Trolls wooden box that has a bunch of stuff in it. I'll come back here and look through some of this also. A bunch of Hex Tech terrains back here. There's so much... my gaming backpack that I fill up with games when I take to conventions. Those cups down there... I give out as souvenirs when someone comes over to play games with me for the first time. And I actually wrote, I designed the skull that's on those cups myself and then had someone print those out for me. But anyways, so that was my little tangent that started with the Walmart dice. And then stuff on the walls also. we'll get to some of those other things. So this is one of my special things that I've found, was this treasure hunt poster for Treasure of the Silver Dragon for the fantasy trip. Look at that, 1980. All this stuff that's like 45 years old. Like, it's crazy. But yeah, I was obsessed with the fantasy trip for a while. So being able to find this poster, and look at this poster, it's never been folded. There are no creases in this poster whatsoever. It is just perfect. Oh my gosh. I am so grateful that when I was living with my parents and I got this, I used to poke thumbtacks through all my posters. For some reason, for this one, I did not do that. It's actually just kind of resting, as you can kind of see there in there. So yeah, there's no thumbtack holes or tears or folds or anything. Some of these things, some friends and stuff gave me, and other things that I made. So for example, a friend of mine did this diamond painting of DBZ Shenron Dragon, gifted it to me. This is my little memorial for my friend Billy, who passed away. We were playing Warriors of Mana, a game I had created. And so we had played 6 games of it. And then he ended up passing early 2020. I can't believe it's going to be 6 years. How is that possible? It's been 6 years since he passed away. That doesn't seem right. It can't be that long, but that's how long it was. But yeah, here we are playing Warriors of Mana in my game room. And this was the map that we used, and every time we'd fight a battle, we would put a sticker on who won. He was red, I was yellow, and this is actually his Warlord's character sheet. Bodolf the Cruel was his name, so I still use his character Bodolf, sometimes in Dicey Depths. But as you can see, we left it 3-3, and we numbered these battles. So like, I won the 1, 2, and 3. He ended up winning 4, 5, and 6. So he was on a win streak before he passed. But yeah, so we still have to settle this at some point, Billy, because it's 3-3. We can't just leave it like that. This is a little promo autographed picture for Stonehaven Dwarves. I backed a Kickstarter for a bunch of those dwarf miniatures that they had created. And fun fact, the artist and I believe sculptor for Stonehaven Dwarves, and of course this was over a decade ago, was actually a former artist and painter for Blue Table Painting. So, and that's how I found out about that Kickstarter, actually. And then my goddaughter colored these dragons. Their parents every so often would invite us over, I think maybe for one of their birthdays or something, and they'd pull out a bunch of art that they had done and ask us if we wanted to take one. So I've taken a couple. So actually behind this one that's up here now, there's another one that was displayed for a while. And then when I got this one, I put this one in front of it. So this is the latest one that I got of her coloring this dragon picture. I thought that was actually really cool. Over here again, souvenirs for my Dicey Depths games. The latest one, I did these Dicey Depths pens, because you definitely need a pen when you play Dicey Depths. Obviously, we have like dragons and castles and stuff like that all around here. These little guys, I actually painted myself. If you ever hear me talk about painting things and how much I don't like painting, back in the day, I painted these little 15mm guys. But what's cool is this little stand that I found. I can't remember where I found this, but I was like, wow, this little stand is like perfect to display these little 15s. And a lot of these are painted figures from Miniature Building Authority Castle Kickstarters. They used to offer these different townsfolk and guards and stuff, and they had a painted option for that. All these buildings and trees in these glass cubes are from Custom Kingdoms, which sadly have since gone out of business. Those were some of my favorite trees of all time. But in this display, I have my Warhammer Fantasy armies for the Empire and Orcs and Goblins. I have my Wood Elves upstairs in a different display. These shelves over here up top are some figures that I couldn't stick anywhere else really, or ones that I like to have easy access to, like this big Tiamat is so cool. But all of these games in these shelves, these are some of my favorite games. There's one cube down here of games that I need to get played, and that is Gaia Project, Hallertau, Bonfire, Terramara, and Lockup. I need to get those played, but all the rest of these I've played and love, and this is a huge, just big shelf full of these games that I absolutely adore. Like Crown of Amara is so good. Hadara is so good. The reason I don't get Hadara played as much is because there's a lot of setup involved in pulling out all the little card decks for this, but it is so fun. And of course, for the longest time, my number one game of all time, and the very first game that I ever bought for modern designer board gaming, Agricola. So this has some nostalgia for me. Back in 2009, so, when I was a kid, so here we go. When I was a kid and I was into, Pokemon and DBZ cards, and then in 2001, I discovered Mage Knight collectible figures. And that's where I really entered the tabletop hobby, because I played Monopoly and Saurian Life and stuff with my parents, but Mage Knight figures really got me into playing tabletop miniatures games. And from there I also got into Magic the Gathering and even Legend of the Five Rings collectible card game. But it wasn't until 2009, for some reason, I was just like 2008, 2009, I was interested in finding more figures and different rule sets for figures. And during my online searches, I found the Board Game Geek website, because they also do have, entries for miniatures rule sets. And that's how I found Hordes of the Things and some of the other rule sets I found. And that's also a big place where I found a lot of the old fantasy board games that I ended up going crazy and collecting. But they have the ranking of every game ever created, ranked by the users of Board Game Geek. And so I registered like December, I can't remember what the month was, but I registered in 2009. I was probably a lurker on Board Game Geek for the better part of a year, if not more, prior to that. But I always use 2009 as my starting date, because that's all I can really concretely say that I was getting into the hobby. But at the time, Agricola was the number one game ranked on Board Game Geek. So I figured, well, these guys know better than I do. So if they say this is the number one game of all time as of right then I'm going to give that a try. And I looked online, watched reviews. That's how I found Scott Nicholson's board game review channel on YouTube, which is still up. And he just celebrated his, what was it, like, I don't know what anniversary he just celebrated on there, but I watched that video because I'm still subscribed to him, because he's like the grandfather of board game review content influencers. And he had a fantastic Agricola review video. And I remember the opening credit of that was like, Agricola, over the pronunciation of Agricola. And that's the only reason why I am able to pronounce it, because of his video. But he did a fantastic video on Agricola. I ended up buying it. I fell in love with it. And then I ended up now with a collection of over 1,100 board games, all thanks to this. In his review video also, he made a funny point, because gamers are a little uptight about their minis, their minifigures and stuff like that. When we play with these and we're so serious about them and stuff like that, and we say, you sometimes will hear some stuck-up people say, these aren't toys, these are wargaming serious materials. And in his review of Agricola, he says, no, they're dolls. We're playing with dolls. And I just never forgot that. I thought that was so funny. You always have to kind of have a sense of humor over that, especially because Agricola, and the point he was making was, this game comes with cubes for the sheep and the pigs, but you can of course now get meeples and even miniatures at this point of actual sheep and pigs and stuff like that. So he was calling them dollies. We were just playing with our dollies in our farm. Dice Forge, fantastic. love this game so much. And again, I'm not going to say I love this game to all these games, because I would say it for Kalimala, Carpe Diem, my favorite Stefan Feld game. Here's that copy of Master Builder. Such a unique game, because you're literally building a 3D medieval village out of different pieces. And this is such a funny game. And I understand why, you may not have heard of it. Serious gamers who don't like luck driven games may not enjoy it, because in Master Builder, first you're bidding on contracts for different medieval buildings that you're going to assemble a workforce and build. After you have your contracts, you then hire and fire workers. And each piece of a building, like maybe a roof of an inn, requires 2 red workers and a purple worker. So you think, okay, I'm going to hire 2 red workers and a purple worker. Well, it's not that simple, because before you're able to build, an event gets revealed. And it may say something like, all green workers, it's raining today and all green workers didn't show up for work, or something along those lines. Every worker has different letter codes for being delinquent or sloppy or lazy. So that may be DSL. That was probably not the acronym, the acronym to use. Anyway, moving on. So a card may come up and say all D workers are out because they're all delinquent and they're lazy today. And so my 2 red workers may be Ds, and they're now gone, and I'm just left with my 1 purple worker, and that worker's not enough to build this. So you kind of have to get a varied workforce of a bunch of different quirks, so that no matter what the event is that happens, you still have enough of a workforce left to build your piece. And the workers are ranked from, like, I don't know if it's green, blue, red, purple, or something like that, where green can only build green, but blue can build blue and green, and red can build red, blue, and green, so they can so you might think, well, I'm just going to buy all purple workers then, because they have the capacity to fill in for all other work types. But again, if their quirks get drawn, they're out of there. And so anyways, but it's just such a cool game. Ray Colt is not one of Uwe's most prolific games, but I actually really like it. This is a very interesting game that kind of takes the planting aspect of Agricola and makes a whole game about it. Planting in greenhouses in Iceland. You're planting veggies, and then tourists come and you have to feed the table with the veggies you've grown. I actually really like it. Castle Merchants is one that the gameplay far exceeds the component quality. So in Castle Merchants, the component quality is not great. It's like little sorry plastic pawns, and even the terrain tile tokens aren't even double-sided. There's only art on one side, but it's so much fun. It's like a pick up and deliver race and set collection for terrain tiles. You're playing cards to put terrain tiles out and move your merchant along the tiles, delivering goods to various castles. And it's a race, because the first person to deliver a good to a castle that wants it, you take the highest dollar amount that's still there. So when someone else delivers cheese to that castle, they have to take the second amount. So anyways, it is a fantastic game, as all these are. Lords of Waterdeep is obviously a classic. Gizmos is so good. I actually prefer Point City to Point Salad, believe it or not. Point City is so good. Guild of Merchant Explorers, Farm Shop. I love any game where everyone's doing things at the same time, kind of like Dice Forge. These two are fantastic. Also like Space Base, where you're rolling on other people's turn. Now, only the active player gets to actually make decisions here for what they're choosing, but then everyone else gets things based on what they've rolled and the decisions that were made. Dice Hospital is so fun. Architects of the West Kingdom is my favorite of the West Kingdom series. Kalis, we just had a big 5-player Kalis night the other night. Kalis still holds up 24 plus whatever years later. Little Town is like the best introductory to worker placement game. Red Cathedral, so all these are so good. Tiny Towns is great for huge groups. I have 2 copies of Tiny Towns in this box, because Tiny Towns is the perfect game where everyone's playing simultaneously and there's no component restriction. So I can play up to 12 people simultaneously with 2 copies of Tiny Towns, and that has been huge because I don't know if I mentioned, like, just the other Saturday, like this last Saturday, we had 9 people. So I can't sadly play Agricola with 9 people, or Hadar or Crown of Amar with 9 people. And you might say, well, why don't you do 2 separate games? Now that's a rant for maybe another time. It's just really hard because it's one of those situations where I don't want to say everyone comes here just to see me, but like, I'm putting on the game night. I just don't think it would go over well if everyone got here and I said, okay, everyone, let's split into 2 groups. One half of you play this game, and then the other play this game with me, and then choose who. Like, it just really wouldn't work out all that well. So yeah, we all played the same game. So if it's 9 players, but also I need more games that can do this, like Tiny Towns, because we don't just want to play Tiny Towns all the time. So like this last game night, we played Roll For It. I just added some more dice to the 2 decks of Roll For It to bump it up to 9 players to be able to play that. And we also played a box. Are You Smarter Than a Box of Rocks? Like some of those trivia games. But that's just the thing. I don't always want to play trivia games with huge groups of people. I want to play more gamery games like Tiny Towns, but there's not enough games of like simultaneous, no downtime, can handle 10 plus people games like that. But anyways, so then here's some more games. I haven't played the Asian expansion for Wingspan yet, just like I also haven't played the Herb Witches expansion for Quacks. That's the other thing. I'll be honest with you. I'm not a huge expansion fan. Like, even I haven't even played Farmers of the Moor for Agricola. I will get a game and I will love it to death. And then you'd think the logical next step would be to add an expansion. So often I just want to stick with the base game. Like, some people say they'll play a base game 30, 40 times and they'll be over it and they need an expansion to revive themselves. I personally haven't felt that. And I wonder if it's because I play games like it'll be a while. So we'll play Agricola one night, and then it may be months before we actually come back around and play Agricola again. So I may have played Agricola 30 times, but there was enough time in between each play that there's enough variety in base game Agricola for me. Now, here's where I may lose some of you. I like Lords of Waterdeep without Scoundrels of Skullport. The only reason that I like Scoundrels of Skullport is because it adds a 6th player for the reasons I was just talking about. Often we have a lot of people playing, so we need to bump it up from 5 to 6. But the whole corruption mechanic, I'm just not a huge fan of. I actually just prefer base Lords of Waterdeep. And I know so many people, when you name your essential expansions, so many people are going to say Scoundrels of Skullport. But honestly, I am anti-expansion for the most part. I'll be honest, I just love base games. I love base Lords of Waterdeep. I love base Agricola. I love base Quacks. I love base Wingspan without any of these expansions. And there's enough variety in there for me. And also, I think it may be just the number of different players I play with, because you play with one group of people in Wingspan, and then you play with a different group of people in Wingspan, and your strategy and everything is totally thrown off with those other people. So you're constantly trying new things. And yeah, so, and then a whole bunch of cool games down here. Reef, Meeple Land, I love for that uh roller coaster tycoon fix and all that kind of thing. um so we come out here, we are looking at some more miniature building authority building stuff, which looks really cool, right? And then this Prize on the High Seas. So I have a whole video on this. Definitely look at this. A friend of mine's dad, for my birthday one year, handcrafted a pirate ship just out of rudimentary materials. It looks so good. And he designed a simple game around it where you have the Imperial Navy versus the pirates. they've boarded the ship and they're stealing loot, and yeah, it is just so fantastic. It's one of my prized possessions in my game room. And then we have this display case. Right now there's a bunch of Lego in it. These are some of my favorite Lego sets from each of the different themes. So for example, the Wild West theme. Now Fort Legoredo would be in here if it could fit. But we have, and I printed out these little stats cards, kind of like a little museum. So Sheriff's Lockup came with 176 pieces and 4 figures in 1996 for 25 bucks. Isn't that crazy? And then you have the Bandit's Secret Hideout with 5 figures. You may say, where's the 5th figure? Well, I think he's hiding back here. No, where is he? Oh my gosh. Oh, he's in the cave. He's riding out with the cannon. See, when this soldier trips that wire, and then this will tip down, and then he'll ride out on the cannon. I think that's hilarious. Then we have the Imperial Trading Post, my favorite pirate set ever, because you have this Imperial, I don't want I guess that's what it's called, Imperial Trading Post. It's an Imperial Trading Post. You have a little merchant ship here. You do have like a little piratey guy over here, but this is like the perfect set for now your big pirate ship to come attack. And then my favorite castle, it was Black Knight's castle. Of course, now it's that gigantic Lion Knight's castle that was just released, because that's the ultimate Lego castle ever released. But prior to that, it was this Black Knight's castle. Look at the heraldry. Look at these knights. Look at the Tudor on the castle. You had a full wrapped around castle. Message intercept base. Again, this came out in 1998. I'm sorry, 1988. So this was likely before I was born, and it just looks absolutely fantastic. You actually had little walkways back in there. You could move this tower up to that walkway, but you had like spaces for people up on the scaffolding up there, and then also down here in their ship. And then some of my favorite old school Lego City town homes, like this vacation camper and this holiday villa and this holiday home. So yeah, just some of my favorite Lego sets piled in there. Now this table was from BoardGameTables.com. They are now something else. I want to say, are they Interplay now? But this was back when they were BoardGameTables.com. Again, I bought this table in 2015. I actually bought 2 tables from them. This table that has a lid. Underneath it here is a recessed playing area, and it fits, I almost said Dungeons and Dragons. It fits Dwarven Forge pieces perfectly. And then this mat. My parents got me this mat for 1 year for Christmas. It is the perfect just board game. You can pick up cards really easily off of this, and it just looks really cool. The other table I bought is in my Lego room. It doesn't have a cover, but it is slightly recessed inside of here, so that round Lego pieces, when you build, don't roll off the edge. They get stuck there. Over here, we have all of these shelves. There's so many fantastic games here. Here's all of my Onslaught stuff. I've been trying to keep up with collecting all of that. My Hand and Eye of Vecna there. Yes, I do still have a couple cubes. I'm trying to hold a bastion here for a couple of these cubes that just have decor in them. But eventually, because that's what worries me, one day, and the decor keeps accumulating. So when I had to put games in this cube, all the decor that was in here got stuffed in here, so now this cube is overflowing with stuff. A lot of these are like gemstone dice, different quartz dice and stuff like that. Here's a bunch of really cool dice, and of course the Demon Idol D&D dice tower in here. But there's a lot of really sweet dice from friends who've gifted me, and my family's gifted me some of these dice, but also some of these dice were sent to me for review, like these here. You can see videos I've done on those, but then there's a bunch of these dice there and there. But yeah, so I worry, obviously if I do have to put games here, the games will go here, but then some of these cool display pieces I'm going to have to find somewhere else to put. But yeah, there's so many great games in here. Mercator is a fantastic Uwe Rosenberg game. This medieval merchant game is actually very interesting. I've only played it solo to get the rules down, but I really want to get that back to the table because it has some really cool mechanics in it. This game, I won't say that out loud, but this is like Adult Go Fish. And this is another one that we played. Let me just show you one of the cards. So instead of asking someone, do you have a 3? You would ask them this. And then if they had this card, they would have to say yes and give you this card. So it's basically Adult Go Fish. And yes, I have the humor of a 12-year-old. So this is absolutely hilarious to me. But then I also found some Pokemon versions of some classic games. Like this is Pokemon Splendor. Can you believe it? Splendor. God, these games are packed in here tight. This is Pokemon Splendor. So instead of the gem cards, you have these different Pokemon, and then they level up to, and then the different Pokeballs instead of the gems. But yeah, that is Pokemon Splendor, just like this is Pokemon Paper Safari. Now, Paper Safari was the only one of these I really didn't understand, because then here is Pokemon, what is this? I can't remember what this is. But obviously there's English translation, because these are all in Korean. But yeah, so it's like, oh, the Korea got all the cool Pokemon variants of some of these fun games, especially the Pokemon Splendor. That's just so cool. Skyrim, the board game. Endless Winters, one of my favorite games of all time. Marrakesh is great. Junk Drawer is so good. Foundations of Rome is just absolutely excellent. There's my Everdell Far Shore down there. Hamlet is so good. Trekking the national parks, there's kind of a cute story behind that because my mom plays a lot of games with me. She's probably played more games with me than anyone else. And she constantly is asking to play games. I couldn't ask for a better person to want to play games with. And so one day I can't remember if it was my birthday or Christmas. I think it was a birthday. She loves national parks and she will go vacation and go see national parks. So she saw this game, Trekking the National Parks, and she bought it for me for my birthday. But not only that, if you know me, I love sleeving my cards. All my games are typically sleeved unless the cost of the sleeves would cost more than just to replace the game. But I sleeve all my games for the most part. And of course, I'm the one to learn all the rules and teach other players. But for this specific game, she bought this game. She learned the rules of it herself, and she even bought sleeves and sleeved all the cards. So for my birthday, she gave me this game. She taught me this game, and we played this game using the cards that she had sleeved herself. So that was just like the ultimate present, just even beyond the game, just the fact that she took the time to learn it and sleeve it and like get it all down just like I would for them. Just the fact she did all that, that just means the world to me. So that's why that game will always be special to me. But so many other great little games. Waffle Time, Sunrise Lane, Coffee Rush is so good. Milfiori, Steam Up, Shake That City. There's so many great games tucked away over here. Up above here, before I forget, some of these are these Mage Knight. Again, back when 2000, 2001-ish, when I discovered Mage Knight, and Mage Knight changed my life essentially forever. And so and I already had, I think it was just this. I already have the Polar Ice Dragon, but it was the only dragon I ever got for Mage Knight. And then one day at a kind of a toy show, a local merchant, Krypton Comics, actually had all 4 of these dragons still packaged up. I was like, what? So yeah, I bought all 4 of these packaged up, and then later on I went back and got this Dwarven Steam Behemoth tank. So my history with Mage Knight kind of actually involves this tank, because it was sometime before or after Christmas 2000, 2001, somewhere in there. I was 12 years old. I was at the Oakview Mall in Omaha, lower level at EB Games, Electronic Boutique. I was just walking in there probably to check out video games. I was a PlayStation fan. And they had a display of this game, Mage Knight. I was like, wait, what? This game of these collectible figures where they came pre-painted out of the box, and I think in their display they had this tank. I remember seeing this tank with some dwarf figures around it, and I bought one pack of Rebellion, which was the initial set that was released. I took it to the food court, I opened it up, and in the Rebellion booster pack was 5 figures, pre-painted figures, and I was just blown away. You had 5 pre-painted fantasy figures where all their stats were on the dial. So when you play the game, and in fact, I have one figure over here, this Gate Lord Mage Knight, actually. So this is what it was. Pre-painted fantasy figures with all the stats on the dial, how many inches the figure got to move, the attack value, the defense value, how many clicks of damage it would do if it hit, and if it had any inches of range. And then it also had a point value. So this Gate Lord costs 130 points. Figures can typically cost anywhere between like 5 points to 200 points, but most figures are going to be like 50 or below. This is just a unique figure, a very powerful figure. But what you would do is you roll 2d6, add it to your attack value, and see if you exceed the opponent's defense value. And then these different colors on those values mean different things. Like an orange square around the speed means this figure can fly. Imagine that. The black circle around the attack value means that it can hit. It's called sweep, and so you'll see this front arc is a full 180 degrees. Some are only like 90-degree front arcs, but this guy has a 180-degree front arc. So sweep, I can't remember if sweep means that it can deal full damage to everyone that's in base contact with this front arc, or if it's, some of the abilities only do 1 click of damage to everyone in the front arc. But sweep may be roll dice and compare it to the defense values of everyone in his front arc. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. The gray square on defense is I want to say invulnerability or invincibility. I think it's invulnerability. It adds to the defense against ranged attacks. So if you attack this guy in melee, it's a 17. But if you shoot at him, I believe it bumps it up by 2 to a 19. But it also reduces the amount of damage taken from ranged or melee attacks as well. And then the square, you always look for a green, because you can obviously click this dial down and the stats will change. So you always ask yourself, well, how do I know where he starts? Well, it's a green square on the damage. That's where he starts. And then an orange square on damage means, I think it's Battle Fury, which means he cannot be captured. I mean, there's a bunch of little rules to that. But anyway, so yeah, as a 12-year-old, opening a box and finding 5 of these guys in it with all the stuff, and they can battle and you just need 2 dice and a tape measure, that was so cool to me. And I remember playing games in my friendly local game store, Ground Zero, and there were people who would play Warhammer, and the Warhammer guys kind of scoffed at the Mage Knight guys, because Warhammer obviously has a lot of books, a lot of stats, templates, all these things. But then us Mage Knight guys would kind of laugh at them, and we would say, how many books do you need to, like, how many books does it take a Warhammer player to play their game or whatever? Whereas us Mage Knight guys, we could, you just need a tape measure, a couple dice in your figures, and an ability sheet if you needed one. But like, we typically memorized what all the abilities were. But I only come back over here because this was the very first Warhammer figure I ever bought. Again, when I was like 12 or 13, I bought a blister pack of 2 High Elf Swordsmen. These were metal figures, and 2 paints, a red paint and a blue paint. And this was actually the first figure that I ever painted. So with my 2 colors, I painted red and blue, and then I mixed the 2 to make like a purple for the sword. But that's just a little side note. I thought it was funny because I still have him all these years later. That would be 24-ish years ago. But here's the D&D D20 popcorn bucket for the D&D movie. Here's something I became obsessed with. I don't know if it was earlier this year or last year. These I never got into Yu-Gi-Oh! The card game, and only recently realized that they had released a pre-painted miniatures game. Like, wait, what? That's absolutely nuts to me. So yeah, players would roll dice to get crests and lay out these dungeon terrain fields and spawn monsters, and monsters would attack each other and the other opponents. And you had these crest things, you had the character cards, you had all these pre-painted figures. So I picked up a starter set of this, and I actually found this, which is a DVD that just has the 3 episodes that focused on Dungeon Dice Monsters, but it also came with a Blue Eyes figure, if that'll focus. But yeah, if this is long out of print and very pricey, I found, if I ever want to get any more of it. But I was like, oh, please, how cool would it be if something like that got released today? That is so cool. Here's my Dungeon of Death Certificate of Achievement 2019. Here are all of every HeroScape 2.0 release from Renegade Game Studios released up to this point, plus those other ones you saw back behind my game counter. And now I just saw the new ones for this year, or for 2026, have gone up for pre-order, and it's about $1,000 if I want to keep up with it. But I mean, I've already come this far, have not opened a single thing yet, and I'll show you about this in a little bit. This is my obsession with, I wish I would have gotten into HeroScape more when it originally came out, because I think all I ever got was, I think it was Rise of the Valkyrie, or whatever the starter set was. But again, that was pre-painted fantasy figures in a box. So yeah, I want to support that as much as I can. So I bought all this, and I will hopefully eventually play this, but just haven't yet. I've been collecting all the stuff for it and not touching it. And then just some other games back here. Oh, take a look at this. Golden Girls Champion 2018. That was Golden Girls trivia. I love me some Golden Girls. There's the Box of Rocks game that we played. This treasure chest is actually a game called Widower's Wood. All of these different games down here. This dragon down here. Here's some funny stuff down here. Oh my gosh. Now I'm like squatting down here. This Iridia. So I love Zaya. Zaya is one of my favorite games. This is from the same designer of Zaya, but this is a fantasy campaign game. This Hot Street game, because I went to my friendly local game store, the Game Shop, that you hear me talk about all the time. So I love Ground Zero and I love the Game Shop. The Game Shop recommended this for a big group because this can play 8, if not 9 or more, this mascot racing. And we played this and it was hilarious. But also all my Uno stuff. So if you ever hear me rant and rave about Uno, I deplore Uno just in its entirety. I had a really bad experience with Uno several years ago, that we played an Uno game that I swear lasted 4 hours, because every time someone would get close, they'd end up having to draw 4, and the game lasted so long that eventually on my turn, or on the person next to me's turn, I'd say, what do you want me to play? I will play it to help you go out, because this game needs to end. That was how bad it was. I was so fuming. So because all my friends know that I hate Uno, they are constantly giving me new editions of Uno. And what has happened is we've now done this 2 years. This year will be 3 years in a row doing the Uno Championships. Oh yes, that's right. The Uno Championships now have become an annual thing, and friends continuously give me new versions of Uno. So every year we play all these different versions of Uno. It's so funny. Oh my god. But this is the latest. They got me this Drunk Uno 6-pack set with these little custom Uno Stanley cups and metal straws, and it's a drinking game. And I mean, just look at this. You're going to have alcohol poisoning within the first 15 minutes if you actually follow these rules, because that is absolutely ridiculous if you're actually drinking alcohol with this. But it's so cute, it's so fun. And then one of my other friends, the friend that actually gets me most of this stuff, he just got me this. He got me the No Mercy expansion pack, and he just got me the Liar's Uno Trust No One. So those were two additional. I have like 15 copies of Uno back there. There's so many more copies of different kinds of Uno back there. This Uno Stacko is probably my favorite one, actually. That's actually a lot of fun to play, mostly because it's not really Uno. It's Jenga. Oh my gosh, can I get up now? Ugh. Okay, so that was all that. My phone does say I'm at 15%. Oh, but there's so much more I want to talk about, and we're approaching almost 2 hours. Don't forget, I was given a license to ramble, so that's exactly what I'm doing. So, so again, all these games are, we have like the Talisman. So many games I'll get, and there's already new editions of them. Like, there's another edition of Talisman already. There's another edition of Descent already. There's another edition of Sword and Sorcery already. But some of those older games that I was collecting with figures are just so cool just to own. So I'm that type of person who I'm just satisfied just owning some things just because I love looking at them. I love going back and looking at them. So many of these older games are crazy. Like Fortress. Fortress is nuts, and that may be one of the earliest games that actually came with pre-painted figures, believe it or not. Go check out my video on Fortress. Across the top here, we have games like Dungeon Dice, which was a thrift store find. I don't know if I fully went into that when I was talking about the HeroQuest stuff, how envious I was that people would always post, oh, wow, yeah, I found, Star Wars Queen's Gambit for $2.50 at a yard sale or something like that. So, yeah, the HeroQuest for like $35 at Imaginarium, that was like my coup de grace. Now, I have found some other really cool games like Tower of the Wizard King. But what I wanted to talk about with this Dungeon Dice. This Dungeon Dice I found at a toy store, but it was my first thrift regret. For some reason, we have a thrift store called New Life Thrift, and I actually find a lot of anime there back in the day. But they had a copy of Dungeon Dice. For whatever reason, I turned it down. A lot of those stores have them taped closed, so I wasn't able to inspect if it was complete or not. But I mean, for a thrift store, a couple bucks, I should have grabbed it. But thankfully, later on, I was able to find another copy of Dungeon Dice. All right, is that everything from over here? Like Sales of Glory. This is another one of those games that I went hard on collecting as much of it as I could because it came with pre-painted Age of Sail ships. How cool is that? So I have all these ships. Now this game, I mean, it has a kind of an easy mode and also an advanced mode. Well, let me just tell you, even the easy mode, that's a stretch. So for me, what I've found after all these years of collecting and playing games is that I really can't do lifestyle games. So lifestyle games means I'm going to learn this game, I'm going to play this game, and I'm going to play this game again fairly soon. And I'll have friends, repeat friends who will play this game with me, and they may collect some stuff for it, and I'll collect some stuff for it, and we can battle our stuff or whatever the case may be. I've just found that that's not the case. So it's always going to be me buying the stuff, supplying everything, learning everything, but then those friends aren't going to be interested in playing it repeatedly enough to warrant, fully investing in it and diving into it. Like Dicey Depths is the exception to the rule where we play Dicey Depths fairly routinely, not routinely, but like once every few months we'll have a big Dicey Depths night. But those rules are so basic and so simple that, you can take a few months off and still know how to play. Something like Sales of Glory, a normal board game these days would have to be, I learn the game, we play the game, and I can play the game in a year and not have to look up too many rules. That's kind of the way things have gotten. And obviously, you can't really do that with Sales of Glory. You can't really do that with some of these other gigantic games that have all these expansions and components and stuff like that. So these days, when I'm interested in getting a game, I have to personally be interested in it, but then also I have to consider, is this a game that the group is going to want to play, every so often or whatever the case may be. But we also have all not all, but we're missing one of the Lego Heroica games. That would be so cool if they ended up coming out with more of those. There's so many more things that I want to talk about, but we do have to eventually wrap this up. Oh, let's talk about this. So I had this book out here because I wanted to give friend of the channel Nathan Wright a shout out. Folks, he did what so many of us have on our bucket list, and he got his book published, Moonfire: The Chronicles of Ethan Lancaster. I got this book months and months ago, and I want to give it a full review at some point. I'm about a third of the way through it now. It is a fantastic read. And but it was so cool that Nathan actually got his book published. That is freaking awesome. And this, I was actually going to bring this up when I was talking about things that friends of the channel have given me, since he gave me a copy of this book. But definitely wanted to give a shout out to him. And if I remember, I'll put a link to the Amazon listing. If I saw right, you can either get it digitally or get a print copy, and the print copy was on sale for like maybe under $5, if I saw that right. So check in the description for a link to his book, especially if you like modern fantasy. I think that that's fantastic. But yes, so far so great with that. I love it. Yes, so here's something that I want to talk about, which is all the old stuff. That's right. So we have like the Magic Realm back here. This is an unpunched copy of Magic Realm. So again, when I was originally collecting a lot of these old games, most of them I was collecting with the thought that I wasn't even really going to play them. It's so funny to me when you look at some of these games, like who was the target market for this? Because these are more rules intense than even a Lacerda Euro game is today. Like Magic Realm is so intense, and that's probably a bad comparison because Magic Realm is pretty universally known as a rules intense game, but there are other games that I'm going to pull out here in a second that was like made for kids, and it has charts, tables, and 30 pages of rules. Like, I guess gamer kids in the 70s and 80s were just built different. So I know some of you are watching this, and I'm talking to you. You guys had the intelligence of a rocket scientist. Like, how in the world were you able to decipher some of these Avalon Hill war game charts and CRTs and all this stuff? But anyway, so we have some really cool games. Divine Right, Dawning Empire, which was a grail of mine for so long. Because as you can see, I was collecting all these really old school fantasy games, some that were fairly obscure, some that were pretty well known. But Dawning Empire from 1983 was eluding me. And you may ask yourself, well, Rick, how do you even find out about it? Again, Board Game Geek, when I first got on there in 2009, I was like filtering just for category fantasy, and I would look like date range, anything pre 1990 essentially. And yeah, some of these games only had like a handful of owners, but Dawning Empire was another one of these that I was like, I need to have this game. Dawning Empire, the story here is that I never thought I'd ever find it. I couldn't find it anywhere online. And price, you know me, I'll throw my wallet at anything. Price was probably no object. So Dawning Empire, I just couldn't find it anywhere, used or new. One day, out of the blue, years after I figured I wouldn't ever see that, someone randomly I never spoke to, never seen before, messaged me on Board Game Geek, and they said, hey, there's a active auction, Goodwill auction running right now for Dawning Empire. And I was like, wait, what? And sure enough, I placed my bid. I was the only bidder. I won the bid. It came with Dawning Empire and a couple other games. Dawning Empire was unpunched. So this copy of Dawning Empire is unpunched. But I was like, who is this mysterious fairy godfather who just found? I'm like, does this person like cross-reference wish lists, because I had it on my Board Game Geek wish list. Does he cross-reference wish lists with live auctions, and just message the people? Like, is that what he does for a hobby or something? I have no clue. But some of these really unique games, like Demons, is crazy. This War of Wizards is truly crazy. This came out. I wish I had a way. I wish I had more like table space around here. There's no way I'm probably going to be able to open this. This is from the early 70s. Here's a good back of the box look at it, though. You have all these chits. All these chits are different spells, and then you have this mat that you're going to be casting spells across. My copy actually does have, it says for ages 12 to adult. I can't wait to hear from someone who played this as a 12-year-old. Like, are you kidding me? My copy does come with a 2d20 and all 4 of the little lead figures uncut. They're actually on kind of a sprue. So I'm very excited about that. Again, probably never going to actually play that game, but here's something that's kind of fun. So at one of those local shops that I go down to downtown, I think that's where I got this anyway. Grenadier's Fantasy Lords. I am going to put this down because I want to open this up, because this came with all this cool stuff. So this, first of all, I'm sure when this was shrink wrapped, this was probably on the back of the box. Has a little quote here from Dave Arneson. And it came with all these fantasy elf figures, except it was missing one. But I was actually able to find the missing one on eBay, so now this set is complete, and it even came with a starter scenario to incorporate these figures into a role-playing game. Even comes with a little map. So I was like, how cool is that? But so I love all these kind of old school gaming aids and whatnot. But yeah, I'm probably now just going to talk about what I have down here until the battery wants to run out. So in here, oh my gosh, so we have, we talked about the Fantasy Trip stuff, and Steve Jackson Games reprinted Necromancer. Here's the original and here's the new one. But I have a bunch of RuneQuest supplements in here. I have the Amber Diceless role-playing game in here. I have all of this. You pull any of this stuff out, some old Dragon magazine stuff, and typically it will have, again, whenever you see a barcode like this is Noble Knight Games I would have gotten this from. So this copy of Dragon came with King of the Tabletop game. This one with Arachnar's Wand game. So any of these old magazines came with some kind of a fantasy game, because again, I was collecting all those. Pull out something in here, like this Mertwig's Maze folio. Like, this is crazy. Tom Wam designed a little game there. There's the Aries stuff again. I was big on the DCC RPG for a long time, so I have the gold foil rule book when that first came out, and also supplements from third parties. There's such good third party support on that kind of thing. This is, I believe all this is my Tunnels and Trolls stuff. One of the very first videos I ever did on the channel was Tunnels and Trolls, and so here's all my Tunnels and Trolls stuff. I have to go kind of fast because I'm at 5% now. Bunch of old games. Like, look at this. This is one that I have to talk about. There's so much old stuff. King's Bounty, Sorcerer's Cave, all these old games. But this, look at this. This came out from Grenadier Games in their Great Little Game line. This little box game called Dwarf Mountain, a game of fantasy adventure. Inside of here, you have your 2d6. You have your rules. You have these charts for dividing up your dwarves into parties, so you know who was in which party. You have all of these charts and tables for reference material. Here are the counters for the game, the good guys and the bad guys. You'd cut these out. There are pads of these score sheets. There is the back. So when this was shrink wrapped, I'm sure this was probably on the back. Full color game board, and I think that's everything in the box. So, but here's the kicker right here. So, for example, great little game line. Proud to present, these games feature full-color box art, full-color playing boards, printed squaresheets, and easy-to-follow rules in booklet form in order to provide a customer with a durable, attractive, professionally developed game. Fast-play scenario style desired by most gamers today. And this is a little description of the actual game. But, so here you go. So you heard it there first. Easy to follow rules, you know, kind of for an all ages kind of thing. Here are the rules in question. Oh, I want to open this up as a tripod. Okay, there we go. So I can be kind of hands-free here. Look at all these rules. We're not even halfway through the rule book. There we go. That's the halfway point. This is the easy to follow rules? What little kid is actually going to play this? Like, this is absolutely nuts. Now, it does mention that you could use miniatures to represent the figures instead of those counters. But, like, are you absolutely kidding me? That is hilarious to me that any child would have ever played a game with that many rules. Even someone like me today would have a problem doing that. So here, before I say any more, let me just say, because I think my phone is probably about to die, I just want to say first, thank you all so much for watching. This has been a blast. But if you ever want to, if you ever are interested in more of this kind of content of me rambling, just let me know. But for these last few minutes, I do want to talk about some of these other things that I have hidden back in here. So, for example, I have all of the different fantasy trip modules. So we have the In the Labyrinth and Advanced Melee, Advanced Wizard, all of the different supplements, including like a metagaming catalog from back in the day. Some of my other Grail games, Kings and Castles, Fantastic Encounters. I have videos on that kind of stuff. Two of the modules that I have, which are kind of interesting, actually don't have anything... These came out after metagaming for the fantasy trip actually folded. So these were originally written for the fantasy trip, but then they were updated to be for the game for Haven. But you can kind of tell that they were originally, because this is by... You know, you see the additional material there, you see the author there, and then you look at some of these modules that were made for the TFT Adventure supplements, and they are from those same individuals, Richard Meyer, Carrie Lloyd. So I just thought that's so cool. You know, if you are someone